Keanu Reeves walks into Aurum Bistro, a fancy restaurant in the heart of the city. He's wearing old, wrinkled clothes, as if he just came from a regular day. Trying not to attract attention, he picks a quiet table in the corner. The crystal chandeliers light up the room, but Keanu's simple appearance stands out in this fancy setting. Before he can even place his order, a waitress named Lila approaches him. She has a mocking smile on her face and an arrogant attitude. "Are you sure you can afford to be here?" she asks, her voice loud enough for others to hear. Keanu just looks up with a small smile, not bothered by her tone. What happens next will shock everyone in the restaurant and reveal something unexpected. Let us know where you're watching from. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., we have another special story for you. Don't forget to turn on notifications. Keanu remains completely indifferent to Lila's mocking words. He just sits calmly at his table, looking around at the luxurious details of the restaurant. Lila, seeing that Keanu isn't bothered at all, pauses for a moment. Her eyes focus on his simple clothes and how ordinary he looks. She couldn't understand how someone could sit so comfortably in such an extravagant place. This restaurant is very exclusive. "Are you sure you belong here?" Lila asks, her voice rising mockingly. Keanu doesn't respond to her at all. He slowly opens the menu, his eyes scanning the options. Lila can't make sense of his indifference, and it only makes her angrier. His calmness is only provoking her more. A while later, as Lila drops the menu on his table, there's still a mocking look in her eyes. But Keanu doesn't get tense. Some of the nearby tables start to notice the situation. A few customers find the waiter's attitude disturbing and are impressed by Keanu's calmness. Another table whispers to each other, "This guy is so calm, so patient. The waiter's attitude is really unnecessary." Lila's anger grows even more as she sees Keanu's composed behavior, but she can't get any reaction from him, which only frustrates her further. Keanu, despite all the pressure, continues to calmly and carefully look through the menu. The tension in the restaurant starts to spread, but Keanu's serenity stands as a source of calm amidst all the tension. Keanu remains indifferent to Lila's mocking words, not reacting in the slightest. He simply sits calmly at his table, looking around at the luxurious details of the restaurant. Lila pauses for a moment, noticing that Keanu isn't at all bothered. Her eyes focus on his simple clothes and how ordinary he looks. She couldn't understand how he could sit so comfortably in such an extravagant place. "This restaurant is very exclusive. Are you sure you belong here?" Lila asks, her voice rising mockingly. Keanu doesn't respond to her in any way. He slowly opens the menu, his eyes focused on the options. Lila can't make sense of his indifference and grows even more frustrated. His calmness only provokes her further. A little later, Lila drops the menu on the table, with a mocking expression still on her face. But Keanu doesn't get tense in the slightest. Some nearby tables have noticed the situation. A few customers find the waitress's attitude disturbing and are impressed by Keanu's calmness. Another table whispers to each other, "This guy is so calm, so patient. The waitress's behavior is really unnecessary." Lila, even more furious at Keanu's cool demeanor, finds herself getting angrier with each passing moment. Despite all her attempts to provoke him, she can't get a single reaction from him. Keanu continues to calmly and carefully look through the menu, unaffected by the tension. The tension in the restaurant begins to spread, but Keanu's calmness stands as a source of serenity amidst it all. Lila had completely lost her patience with Keanu's calmness. With each passing minute, his attitude became more and more difficult for her to bear. After Keanu placed his order, the waitress smiled as if she had won some kind of victory. But Keanu still didn't react. He calmly closed the menu and looked around. Lila, her eyes filled with anger, watched him intently. "Are you sure you'll like the food?" she asked, her mocking tone more pronounced this time. Keanu, with his calm demeanor, still didn't respond. "Yes, it looks great," he replied, but the unchanging calmness and self-assurance in his voice only pushed Lila further over the edge. As Lila observed Keanu's calm and determined behavior, her anger grew even stronger. But with each passing minute, Keanu's tranquility made it even harder for her to get a reaction. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't provoke him. Then, as she continued to watch him, the waitress paused for a moment, noticing the stares of the surrounding customers. At some tables, people were watching Keanu, admiring how indifferent he was to everything happening around him. Other customers found Lila's mocking attitude disturbing and turned their heads, closely watching how the situation would unfold. Keanu, however, was completely unaffected by the tension in the air. He was simply waiting for his food calmly and patiently. Lila was determined to break this calmness, but Keanu's unresponsiveness was rendering her attempts completely ineffective. Her anger had reached another level, but in the face of his unwavering demeanor, she didn't know what to do next. Lila was growing increasingly impatient with Keanu's calmness. As always, Keanu remained indifferent and cool-headed, but Lila continued to try to push his patience. As the waitress walked toward his table with his order, she was still waiting for some kind of reaction. The more Lila couldn't detect any signs of discomfort in Keanu's eyes, the more unsettled she became. The atmosphere in the restaurant was becoming more tense due to Lila's attitude. A few customers had noticed the waitress's behavior. One table was discussing how rude her attitude was and how much effort she was putting into belittling Keanu. However, Lila was still trying to break Keanu's patience. "How much do you trust the chef's dish? Are you really sure you'll like it?" she asked, once again trying to mock him. But Keanu remained silent, completely indifferent to her mocking behavior. Some of the people nearby were admiring Keanu's composure, thinking that the waitress's behavior was uncalled for. A few customers had noticed and started criticizing her actions. Despite the tense atmosphere, Keanu continued to act in a way that didn't show any signs of it affecting him. Lila had completely lost her patience. Keanu's calmness and patience had shown her that she wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. As her anger kept growing, Keanu was still quietly sitting at his table, waiting for his food. The tension in Lila's eyes only made it harder for her to provoke him in any way. Lila was no longer able to be patient with Keanu's indifferent attitude. After the waitress took his order, Keanu was still calmly waiting for his food as she walked toward his table. Lila couldn't understand his cool and indifferent demeanor. With every passing minute, her anger grew. Since Keanu still hadn't reacted, Lila was losing her patience. After a while, the waitress Lila saw an opportunity to comment on Keanu's meal. This time, she tried to provoke him further by asking, "Does the food really suit someone like you?" Her voice dripping with sarcasm. Keanu slowly lifted his head, glanced at his menu, and calmly replied, "Yes, it looks wonderful." For a moment, Lila was taken aback by Keanu's response, but quickly recovered and tried to act as though she was just taking the order. His calmness only put her in a more difficult position. Lila kept trying to provoke Keanu, but his indifference was ruining all her plans. Some people at nearby tables had noticed Lila's attitude and were watching the situation unfold with curiosity. Keanu's demeanor remained calm and respectful. despite the waitress's provocative behavior. Lila took every chance to try to upset Keanu, but he remained indifferent, simply waiting for his meal. Lila didn't know what to do with the calmness that stood before her like an obstacle. Keanu's calm demeanor was beginning to trigger Lila's growing frustration. With each passing second, the waitress's eyes became more intense as she watched Keanu, waiting for some kind of reaction from him. Lila continued to try and provoke Keanu at every opportunity, but each time, Keanu's indifference didn't give her any response. After a while, as the waitress was walking to deliver his order, Keanu's continued lack of response only made Lila angrier. She couldn't see any change in his eyes, which made her even more irritated. "Is the food really suitable for you?" she asked sarcastically. Keanu smiled and calmly replied, "Yes, it looks great." Such a simple response only made Lila's anger grow even more. Keanu's composed demeanor was noticeable even at other tables in the restaurant. One couple at a nearby table noticed the waitress's behavior and whispered to each other, "This guy is really calm. What a polite person," as they watched Keanu. They were criticizing the waitress's attitude while admiring his composure. Lila ignored all these observations and continued to push Keanu. But with every attempt, she grew more and more tense. Keanu, still without hurry, kept calmly taking his order while not showing any change in his attitude, despite the waitress's harsh approach. Lila could no longer accept that Keanu was completely unaffected and indifferent toward her. Her anger grew with every passing minute. When she went to deliver his order, her attempt to break Keanu's patience failed once again. With a still mocking smile on her face, she tried to belittle him by saying, "The food should be suitable for someone like you." Keanu didn't react to her mocking words and calmly replied, "Yes, it really looks great." His calmness only made Lila more furious. Keanu's lack of reaction was noticeable to the other customers in the restaurant. One table, shaking their heads at Lila's behavior, whispered, "It must be hard to stay this patient." Lila was disturbed by these remarks, but still couldn't stop belittling Keanu. "I hope the chef's dish meets your expectations," she said, continuing to test Keanu's calmness. Keanu, completely undisturbed, continued to eat his meal. There was still tension in the restaurant, but Keanu's patience had a soothing effect, completely opposite to the atmosphere around him. No matter what Lila did to break his patience, she couldn't provoke a single reaction from him. Some couples at nearby tables admired Keanu's patience. They criticized Lila's behavior, feeling that her attitude was harming the restaurant's luxurious reputation. Keanu, still calmly eating, was completely unaffected. While Lila grew increasingly frustrated as she returned to her table, Lila had become increasingly frustrated, seeing that Keanu was completely unaffected by her actions. No matter how hard she tried, Keanu's calm demeanor rendered all of her efforts pointless. Lila couldn't take much more of the waitress's patience and the tension she felt building inside. Keanu's ability to stay so calm had not only challenged her patience, but also drew the attention of other customers in the restaurant. One customer at a nearby table admired Keanu's composure and said to his friend, "What a patient man. Staying calm in such a situation is truly impressive." When Lila overheard these remarks, it only made her more tense. While the other customers appreciated Keanu's demeanor, they were clearly noticing how rude the waitress was behaving. Finally, Lila decided to approach Keanu. But this time, something was different. The anger inside her had begun to fade, and she was starting to appreciate his patience and calmness more. As Keanu remained indifferent to everything, something inside Lila was beginning to change. "How's the food?" Lila asked, this time more carefully and respectfully. Keanu smiled calmly again and replied, "It's very good, thank you." Lila didn't know how to respond to such a calm answer. Her anger was slowly turning into a kind of respect. Lila was taken aback by Keanu's patience. At that moment, she realized that patience wasn't just endurance, but also strength. Keanu's calmness was teaching her that in certain moments in life, being patient could be the most powerful response. Keanu turned his eyes to Lila one last time. This time, there was not only calmness in his gaze, but also a sense of understanding and patience. As Lila looked into his eyes, something began to change within her. Keanu's ability to remain so calm was starting to mean something to her. With each passing minute, she realized that patience wasn't just a form of strength, but also a form of grace. As Keanu took his last bite, he continued eating slowly, completely unaware of the stares around him. Lila began to question her own behavior in response to Keanu's patience. The other customers in the restaurant were still watching Keanu, admiring his composed demeanor. Suddenly, the waitress, Lila, approached Keanu and said, "It's really impressive to stay this calm," a little hesitantly, but sincerely. Keanu smiled calmly and replied, "Thank you." Lila was deeply affected by his demeanor. The anger inside her had been replaced by a deep sense of understanding. Looking at Keanu with patience and meaning in her eyes, Lila said, "There's really so much to learn. Patience could be the answer to everything." As she spoke these words, she truly understood the lesson Keanu's patience had taught her. Keanu just nodded and smiled, then stood up calmly without saying another word and left the restaurant. There was a silence in the restaurant. Lila knew that from that day on, she would never be the same person. Keanu's patience had taught her not only the right way to act, but also how to be more respectful and understanding towards others.